did they change the music?
What was up with how beautiful that was?
I never figured out what that other song sounded like to me, and it had almost got it every time, and then it ended, and I had to start the show, and now I'm going to take that to my grave.
I was stuck listening to that between elevator music and passionate lovemaking, and it was everything I've ever wanted.
Can't believe StreamYard changed the music. I will be sending them a note, a dissatisfied customer very shortly later.
There wasn't
today.
even a notice.
No. Is there a second one? Is there another one that I can get to?
How do we opt back into the other one?
Is it still? Hey, crap.
Yeah, then it mutes our mics.
Yeah, I know. Welcome into Nebrasketball Brunch Show. I'm Jack Mitchell. That is Kaleb Henry. We do this every Friday at 11 a.m. Central during the season to talk about the week that was and the weekend that is coming for Nebraska basketball. You can watch us if you're watching us live now on YouTube, either on the I-80 Club or Husker Max YouTube pages. We would ask you just if you would support us by liking and subscribing. That would be great. You can also get notification of when we're going live with some of the other stuff we do, especially related to Nebrasketball, the After Nebrasketball show. We do a post-game show about half hour or so after 20 minutes to a half hour after every basketball game, where Jacob Bigelow from Huskers Illustrated also joins us, and we kind of break down the game that was, a little post-game after the radio post-game. So we would love to have you for that coming up on Monday night when Nebraska takes on Michigan. And also maybe welcome to we are now on Twitch, on Husker Max's Twitch page as well. So shout out to anybody who is watching us there. That's great too. All right, Kaleb, let's jump into it for after Nebrasketball. Excuse me, for the Nebrasketball Brunch show.
Yeah.
2 games, 1-1 on the road trip. A wild, looked like they were dead and gone against Northwestern. Battle back in the second half from 20 down, get the win. You guys did the post-game show. I was only a minor part of while I was swimming around in the pool in Arizona.
People forget.
And people do forget that. Yeah, that was fun. I would like to do all of them like that. And then, of course, the loss that we just talked about two nights ago to Penn State, where Nebraska was absolutely dominated. Everything that went poorly in the first half that did go poorly. In the second half, it was slightly better, but nowhere close to better enough to make another comeback, to do that twice in 1 week. And so they come home 1-1 after this is all over, and they now stand overall in terms of record, in terms of conference record, as I'm pulling that up right now because I don't want to say it wrong. Kaleb, jump in if you have the numbers in front of you, because
Nebraska right now is 7-9 in the league, 17-10 overall.
All right, that's 17-10, 7-9. 2 wins to get to 19-9-11. 3 wins in the regular season to get to 20 wins and 10-10. There are 4 games left, 3 of them at home. Michigan, Iowa, Minnesota, actually Michigan, Minnesota, Iowa in that order. And then sandwiched between those last 2 is a road game at Ohio State. Those are the 4 games left. And we're going to get into this later in the show. Obviously, if you win all 4 of them, you were all good. You're in a great position. You're thinking about seeding. If you win 3 of them, you're looking, you're feeling pretty good when you go to bed before Selection Sunday. If you win 2 of them, that's probably the scenario that we need to talk about, and if they win one of them. So we will delve into that. But before we do any of that, every week on the show, we do our NCAA tournament confidence meter. Kaleb, last week, we were both kind of steady. I went up a little bit. You stayed steady. You were at an 8 even, and I was at a 6
correct
even.
So you moved up last week. It's a 1-2 or a 1-for-2 week, a 1-1 week for Nebraska. Are you going up again, or are you staying steady?
Well, I battled with this a little bit, because I said what I said was they've got to go 1-1 this weekend to kind of tread water, right?
Yeah.
And that's what they did. And so you could argue the number should be the same. That said, the performance against Penn State was so rough that you're worried it might hurt your resume a little, but you're also worried about what it means for the rest of the season. And so if I go anywhere, it would be down a little bit, but I was already at 6, which I don't think was overly high given the scenario. I do still think there's a better chance than not they'll make the tournament. I think 5.5 still feels too low. I'm going to stay flat at 6 for this week, Kaleb.
Things looked bad the other night. There's no way around that. You also had the combination of Penn State unable to miss. It's not that they I think at times they could have tried to miss and the ball still was going to go in for a large portion of that game. But they did go 1-1 on the road this week. And looking at where the rest of the bubble is, in Nebraska up to 17 wins and a favorable, I would still say, even with Michigan coming to town, a favorable last 4 games of the regular season, I'm actually going to go up to an 8.5.
Really?
I am actually more confident right now because of the way that they were able to go and split on the road and the way the rest of the bubble hasn't necessarily wowed anybody with what they're doing.
Okay.
And that's where we're at, Jack, and that's why the title on this, if wherever you're watching, would 19 wins be okay? Would that be enough for this basketball team to make a return trip to the NCAA tournament? Right now, I'm saying, yeah, I'm extremely confident in that.
All right. We'll delve into that during the course of the show today then. So Kaleb up to an 8.5. I stand steady at a 6. Just more likely than not. I only do half point, so I guess I could have been at 5.5 and gone a little bit closer to halfway, but I will stay at 6. Let's see. Let me know on the chat. And by the way, our Discord chat is who we talk to during the show. If you want to be a part of these live studio audiences that we interact with, you can always join our Patreon. And that gets you on the Discord and gets you a part of the live studio audience. And if you're not going to do the Discord thing, but you do want to chat, you can also do super chats. It's one of the things that just supports us and lets us be able to take the time to continue to do this. So if you want to send us super chats during this or after Nebrasketball, we can do that. Otherwise, get on that Discord, have some fun. A whole bunch of great stuff going on there. Okay, Kaleb, let's get to the meat of the discussion. Should we go over some just like metrics first, and then we can start talking about the different scenarios? Does that sound good?
Yeah. First, though, just real quick, because obviously it was just you and me. It was no Bigelow the other night. Do you have any feelings now that we're 2 days removed
that's a good question.
From Penn State?
Yeah, I did. I did say I wanted you to ask me that. I kind of feel the same way. I kind of feel the same way that I did. Like, it's disturbing that it got that bad again. It's concerning that this team's ceiling is, or excuse me, that their floor is so low. That said, we've seen the low floor, unfortunately, 3, maybe 4 times already this season. At least if you're talking about, at least in certain halves, maybe 4 or 5 times this season. And they've rebounded from it multiple times and looked like the good version, the best version of Nebraska after it. And so, like, I don't particularly have a concern that they've regressed now to this, whatever this is permanently, because they go like this, right? And so you would think another one of these is likely coming based on the pattern that you've seen so far. So no other, Kaleb, I mean, I don't have any other thoughts in that. I continue to be baffled by the defense. That was a problem. It felt like they made adjustments on offense that made a difference for them in the second half. I thought they actually had a fairly efficient offensive game in the second half, which if you had the entire game would have felt very different. You wouldn't get down 14-2 or whatever it was, but God, still the defense against Penn State, the amount of open shots, open looks at the rim, good layups, Kaleb, there were just so dang many of them. And I don't know how much of that is a function of Berke being out or something else in that game, but it was rough. And the other thought is, one of the biggest reasons I think this is happening is Juwan Gary doesn't look like Juwan Gary again. Like, man, this team goes so much with him and Bryce, and Gary he's not getting the big rebound numbers. He's not getting the defensive stops. He's not getting those things as well. Those are my biggest concerns in terms of sort of getting out of whatever that hole was. How about you?
Yeah, that first half as a whole was a concern. And this is there's been a little bit of a pattern since you had the Illinois and Oregon games where Nebraska trailed for a total of 46 seconds over the course of those two contests. And then Nebraska has not let it half since then. It has been really poor starts and then a flurry of a second half in a couple of them to grab some wins over this stretch. So which Jekyll or Hyde are you? Like what is this team? And a lot of the social media talk was that this team is only the first half of what you saw against Penn State. And it's only the team that got blown out by Michigan State. It's only the team that was the second half against Iowa. But there you don't get to 17 wins and have these other moments of success without being something else other than what went wrong and was extremely disappointing, was flat out embarrassing. You don't get to do those other things unless you have something that's not that. So I think about that Penn State game in the way of the defense wasn't there, but I didn't see over the course of the game the drooping shoulders, the guys lacking for energy.
I kind of agree. Yeah,
in the same way that you saw other losses happen, just Penn State did not miss. They were shooting around 68, 69% over the first about 30 minutes of the game. And then that cooled off to 60% for the full 40 minutes. But Nebraska shoots over 50%. Nebraska shot over 60% in the second half. Just could not get any stops at all. And ultimately, when you're doing that, you're going to get out rebounded. The numbers look a little bit better by the end of the game, but it just came down to Penn State shot absolutely lights out. Maybe they were due. They were on that 7-game skid, but it's a little bit not entirely indicative of the way they had been playing because of, I think, 3 games by a total of like 4 or 5 points that they had lost. So they're not everything was as bad as it looked for just saying a 7-game losing streak, last place in the Big Ten Conference. And you combine that with Nebraska not necessarily showing up for the first half, and it's not going to go Nebraska's way. And you didn't have Berke. And I don't think that really makes a difference the other night, but we've seen in a couple of these games, especially when it comes to anything inside, it would be nice to have another 6'10" guy who can move some people around.
100%. 100%. Looking deeper into that box score, Kaleb, Nebraska versus Penn State, Hicks for Penn State, he's kind of that stretch forward for them. He had arguably his best game of the year. Goes 7 for 12 from the field, 5 for 9 from 3-point range, scores 19 points, ends up with 6 rebounds in the game, 2 assists, 3 steals. It was a problem again, and he was shooting from outside, and Niederhauser, you go up against him, and he's a young guy, certainly athletic, but he sort of feels like the type of center Nebraska is usually able to figure out with those double teams. And at the beginning, they got a couple of steals from him on those where Hoiberg would come over and double and steal. But
yeah,
man, he figured it out. 7 for 10 from the field, 5 for 6 from free throws. He had just a killer game too. And in addition to making the threes, like that was what was working. That was what was working for him. That inside game in Nebraska didn't have an answer defensively, and Niederhauser can be all over the place, right? He had 19 in this game. Previous 2 games before it, he had 10 against Washington. He had 3 against UCLA. He's got a lot of single-digit games. He's got some games up there, 17, 18, 19 too, but those 2 guys had among their best games of the year. They're big guys, and of course, again, Hicks was partially outside, but I hope that's because Berke is going to make a little bit of a difference in there defensively, because they just don't have. It doesn't seem like they've got the manpower to play really solid defense on bigs right now.
No, they don't, because you're not able to go with 2 bigs at any time. You're not able to have Berke and Andrew Morgan, or Berke and Braxton Mia out there at the same time. You're not really going to do a Mia and Morgan, because one of those guys has to be getting some rest while the other guy is on the floor. So you're not going to play both of those unless it is very situational, and it's maybe for 30 seconds. And the
foul problems contributed to that too.
Exactly. Hopefully Berke is closer to returning than it being truly extended into past this home stretch where you have back-to-back games at home next week, but you've got 4 days off between this last game in Michigan, and you have 4 more days off before you host Minnesota. So there is some stretch of time to get things right. That makes me wonder, when you look at the lineup, if Berke is healthy, you simply slide him in for like Sam Hoiberg, right? If he's not healthy, the conversation popped up all over social media. Do you sacrifice what Sam does defensively for the way Connor Essegian is shooting right now to start the game with that? That has become the conversation. But with every one of these guys, it is, what are you willing to sacrifice in order to get that? With Sam Hoiberg, you are sacrificing some offense to get the defense.
And the problem at the beginning of the game is both offense and defense. So it's not like one, but the defense, I think, has been the longer lasting problem for this team right now. So I would still probably lean defensively. Let me give you this stat if you want to know something that's changed in the last 3 games. Juwan Gary rebounds in the last 3 games. 4 rebounds by Juwan Gary in the last 3 games. Total.
Oh, man.
1 against Penn State, 1 against Northwestern, 2 against Maryland. That's after going 5 against Ohio State, 7 against Washington. You want to know why Nebraska's not getting rebounds? Juwan Gary isn't getting rebounds.
Yeah. And is some of that, I'm curious, because those have been games that Berke's been out. I'm curious, is Juwan's ability to rebound dependent on having another big guy in there to block out their big guys?
You wonder. Yeah.
And he's got extremely tough matchups with trying to body up at 6'6", going against these guys 6'9", 6'10 plus. Obviously he's not as wide as these guys that you've seen. I'm wondering if that's got a lot to do with it as well, that you're just not able to go in and kind of, his rebounds are never he's blocking someone out and he goes straight up. His rebounds are, other guys are kind of blocked out and he flies through the lane and he goes and he's just athletic, moving laterally just as well as he's able to get vertical, but you don't have another big body on your side out there. And I'm going to have to watch that a lot more on Monday. Is he just kind of like, is he hunkered down trying to get a body on somebody instead of being able to move freely? Yeah.
And then if you go back to when he was performing well, he had 5 rebounds against Ohio State. Berke had 6 in that game. Juwan Gary against Washington had 6. Berke had 8. I mean, it's not hard to see what's happened to the rebounding. They're 2 best guys who play significant minutes rebounding. One isn't playing, and the other one isn't performing well with the other one playing on the boards. And again, this isn't the only issue, but when you see the out rebounding in game after game, and it feels like when you're watching them that's happening, I mean, this is why. I mean, man, I'll do another one. Against Oregon, you had total rebounds, 5 for Juwan Gary. Berke had 9. Berke was rebounding better than I realized, Kaleb. That is a much bigger loss. I do think he's a bigger loss defensively all around than we realized. And I think that is a big reason why the bigs that have played against Nebraska were really, really giving them even more of a problem in what's usually already a bad matchup when you have multiple athletic bigs. We established that talking about Maryland. And so getting him back is very important for Michigan. I mean, I don't know how to put it any other way. For that Michigan team, with a couple of basically 7-footers who are on the court most of the time,
that'll be, and it is every time that Michigan is there, but that'll be one of the games that you see a number of NBA scouts at. It's just that's what happens when you show up and it's Michigan. So the media area, if anyone ever peeks over there, might be a little bit shifted around because there'll be some extra bodies. But also what you've got is Nebraska only has 3 home games left. And it's one of those things where you're sitting on the bubble, maybe not. We'll look at depending on where a lot of the different bracketology is. But this team is still squarely in the hunt as an NCAA tournament team. And to get back to the tournament for the first time in back-to-back seasons in 30 years,
Yep.
So since it hasn't happened since the early and mid 90s, I expect Pinnacle Bank Arena to be pretty loud, and it's a lot more helpful for that crowd to be up and juiced if you are fully healthy, or whatever's good enough for Barricade to go is that 80%, and something that gives the crowd something to get loud for over the course of the game. If they come out at home the way they have the last few games and it gets out of hand early, I'm not going to be surprised if people say we're just headed home. And it's not one of those beat traffic at the under 4. It's going to be one of those, hey, it's halftime, it's already pretty bad. Let's stick around and for a little bit, and then let's head home.
And that's the result of these low floor performances. If that does happen, right? There's a lack of confidence that's been instilled about when things get bad. Now, remember, of course, they did come back against Northwestern, but that's if that happens, it's 100% the low floor performances. I want to get one other chat on the Discord before we take a bigger look at things. Skirzo4 says, no idea why every team doesn't just press us on the inbounds. You can't handle it. That's true. And then it's just ball handling in general. Again, the turnovers in the first half were a huge part of the problem. And you look at it, Hoiberg had just a horrendous first half with turnovers, kind of uncharacteristic for him. But Raleigh had 3 also, right? Mm-hmm. Bryce Williams had 2. Andrew Morgan, Morgan's always going to have a couple during the course of the game. Had 2 as well. Griffiths had 2 in 16 minutes. Nebraska ends up with 16 turnovers, and you're surprised it wasn't even worse with how that they did clean that up a bit. They got, Ulis got in and wasn't doing much, but he wasn't turning the ball over, and that's why he got so many minutes during the course of that game, as they were just trying to stem the tide of the turnovers. But that also, I think, hampered the offense to some degree as well. But the point that was made by Skurs in the chat stands. High pressure defensive teams really bother Nebraska. There's just not enough. There's not enough confident ball handlers on this team.
Yeah. Well, and we talked about that during the 6-game slide, the few weeks of hell or whatever you called it. The teams were able to come out and be physical and bully Nebraska a little bit, especially around the perimeter. More teams should be doing that over the course of the entirety of the court. Do that in the backcourt more. Make Nebraska take time getting up the floor, because what has Nebraska shown? If the first option offensively so many times, and this is a big frustration too, if the first option isn't there, what does everyone do? They just stand and go, what now?
Yeah.
And like there'll be such a good set, and it'll take 8 to 12 seconds, because you'll get a pass, you'll get a couple screens, someone will come up, they'll get the ball, they'll swing it, the shot won't be there, they'll set another down screen, and Connor will come up, and the 3 won't be there, and then everyone stops. Yeah. And you're like, well, there's 15 seconds left on the shot clock. Do something.
And even when they get like Asian, I think the first 3 he made, he just had a split second where he got open. The play worked. It was a good play, and he made it. But it's not like some of the 3s Penn State had with nobody in the same zip code that they ended up shooting. Nebraska just doesn't see very many of those. And when teams get aggressive, as you were saying, on the perimeter, it almost like it hampers them so much, Kaleb, from running their game plan, that they really get out of sorts. And they got to punish teams if they can punish teams for putting pressure on them, that's what they've got to do, and figure out how to do that. But again, do they have the personnel to really do that? Bryce, for everything he does well, he also is turnover prone.
Was it Illinois who is pressing a lot late in the game? Because they force overtime and then they get behind. But Nebraska,
it was Ohio State. Ohio State, Nebraska killed but that was like aggressive, all-out press. Right. Nebraska got behind them.
But still, there was a stretch where this team said that they could recognize what was happening with the pressure, that they could recognize they needed to get the ball up floor. That guy came open. It's the same thing when you talk about quarterbacks. Can you recognize the defense in that it's a soft zone or it's a pressing man?
Yep.
And you saw that being a real pressing man, and you were able to get behind it. So, it's the same thing with what happened against Penn State, and then what Nebraska did over the losing streak and what Nebraska did over a winning streak. They have shown the ability to recognize where they're at in games, to recognize what they're able to do, but they've also shown the ability to be blind in those moments and everything go wrong. And it's still, what is this team? How much percentage is the Jekyll? What percentage is the Hyde? And what does that mean for 4 regular season games? You still haven't clinched a Big Ten tournament spot, so you still need to make sure you can get in there. Right now, sitting in the 9 spot, tied with Ohio State, or I guess Ohio State would have the tiebreaker there, so technically 10th. But what can you do over those games? A Big Ten tournament, at least a Big Ten tournament game to set yourself up for the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, for sure. All right, should we get into those? You were starting to delve into it there, the bigger picture, the scenarios, those sorts of things. 4 games left, 7-9. To get to my number I've been asking for all year, you've got to go 3-1. Obviously, that would be winning out at home. If you beat Michigan on Monday night, all of a sudden that looks a lot more doable.
Yeah.
If you lose that one, that looks like a huge uphill battle because you'd have to pull off a win at Ohio State, who's not playing well, but still it's a game on the road. And of course, Minnesota and Iowa will not be gimmies. Minnesota now is playing, of course, Kaleb, the best they played all year. And Iowa, I mean, just put whatever the over-under is for Iowa's 3-point field goal percentage in that game, take the over.
Hammer the over.
Hammer the over no matter what. And so Nebraska will be favored in both of those games, but there's not one person who's listening to this right now who feels super confident about those games. Right?
This is one of the tough parts of having these massive leagues where you're only going to see a couple teams twice. But think back to when leagues were small enough, you could have a home and home with everybody. So you got to see someone at their place, and then you got to see them a little bit later at your place. Right now, Nebraska is running into some of these teams who are playing better than they have at other portions of the conference season. And I know it's not fair, and it's already an unbalanced schedule. Just that's what Nebraska is running into right now as they're trying to close out an NCAA tournament bid. So you look at that. You got Rutgers at Pinnacle Bank Arena. Guess what? They were playing about as well as they had all season.
Yep.
Or Maryland.
Maryland, yes.
Maryland, yeah.
Yep.
So well, yeah, I mean, even Rutgers played pretty well too. So you go through, and it's that is the tough part that Nebraska is battling at this point. You look at some of the bracketology. Joe Lunardi with ESPN, as of this morning, has Nebraska as one of the last 4 byes.
Okay.
So in the tournament, not headed to Dayton, but one of the last 4 byes has Nebraska as a 10 seed, if I remember that correctly. Yep, 10 seed playing against Memphis in Wichita.
Okay.
I would take that.
For just go through a few other ones, team rankings in their bracketology, they have got Nebraska right now as a 10 seed. Now, this is based on their this is predicting what happens the rest of the season. It's not kind of a snapshot in time now. This is the same way that Bart does it, but they've got Nebraska finishing at 19-12, which gets them the top 10 seed according to that. So bookmark that for the discussion.
Okay.
And Bart has Nebraska projected at 19-12. And so then if you go to their tournament ranketology is what Bart Torvik calls it. And you look at where Nebraska is in that with a projected 19 win record. They are the second 10 seed. So team rankings and Bart both say Nebraska gets 19 wins. They are then going to be a 10 seed and still in fairly safely then, right? I guess in that they are, let's see. No, I take that back. I read that wrong. The 11 seed, the second 11 seed. So they would be the last bye in that scenario. Team rankings likes them a lot more. But in both those scenarios, they have Nebraska with 19 wins still getting into the tournament. According to percentage chances of getting in, we just did ours. According to according to Bart Torvik, he's got Nebraska with a 63% chance of getting in, a little less confident than Kaleb. That said, team rankings has Nebraska at an 84% chance of getting in.
Okay.
The ones that take a current look at the bracket don't do a lot for me right now because
you need to project it a little bit on how things are going to happen.
Of course, they are in right now. Yeah, I agree. They are in right now, but what happens when they go 2-2? What happens when they go 1-3. Let's go through those scenarios real quick, Caleb.
Okay, I mean, because I got a couple other bracketology.
Go ahead. Oh yeah, if you got more metrics, give me those.
Yeah. So JBR bracketology as of this morning has Nebraska as the last 10 seed and would be part of the last 4 buys.
And is that a shot, snapshot of time in that? That's not a projection out one.
Yeah, that's more of a snapshot in time. Now, T3 goes through and does locks, almost locks, should be in, bubble in, etc. Nebraska's still sitting in should be in, but 2 wins from a lock. And that is that number we're looking at projecting at 19.
I hope they are all right, Caleb. I hope 19 is enough, man. It doesn't getting a losing record in conference and 19. And then if you went down in the first day in Indianapolis, which would probably be not a quality loss, that scenario, I would not sleep. I would not sleep on Saturday night before Selection Sunday in that scenario. Maybe they're right, but man, I either want 20 wins through the regular season or at least give me the 1 win in Indianapolis, at least. Get me to 20 one of those ways, and that is where I will say, pretty good. I will feel pretty good if they do that. 19, I'm going to be on pins and needles if they end up at 19 in any case. Now, if they would get to 21, either in the regular, if they go 4-0, man, we're getting excited about seeding, right? At that point, if they can finish this out 4-0.
Well, I mean, because in that situation, you beat Michigan Monday, you beat Minnesota on the Saturday, you're at 19, you're playing with house money because some places have already called you a lock. You're on the road to Ohio State before coming home with Iowa. You're talking about in the next 8 days, if you were to win those 2 games, you're talking about seeding, not if you're in or not.
Right. Now we're not going to do we're doing all the scenarios. None of us think that's probably, going to happen.
I don't think that's
but I guess
quite likely.
Who knows? The 3-0 scenario is 20 wins, Caleb, and I stand by being very comfortable with that if they do that, because not only would they would have to beat either Michigan at home or Ohio State and get another very high quality win if they would get that, and add either of those would be a quad 1 win. You'd add yet another quad 1 win to your record this year, and that would put you at, let me look at the latest, that would put you at 6-6 for quad 1 wins on the season. 6-6 for quad 1 wins. I should pull up last year's NET.
And do you have the separation on the quad 1A versus quad 1B?
I don't. The net doesn't give you that, so I don't know the answer to that one. It just says 1, 2 in this. They might actually have that on Bart.
Bart does have that actually. In Nebraska is 2-6 right now against quad 1A.
Okay.
5-8 overall currently against quad 1.
Okay. Yeah, that would be a boon to that would be a huge boon, right? To the resume there. I wanted to look at last year's 2024 NET, and I can't quite find it right now, so that's annoying. Because I wanted to break down exactly what Nebraska's record in that was. Let's see if I'm finding it here.
Here, I can give you this from.
They were 4-8. They were 4-8 in quad 1 last year.
1-4 in quad 1A.
1-4 in quad. And what did you say they were this year?
And this year sitting at 2-6 right now.
Okay, so that's not all that different, but they went 23-11 over.
And I know it's like the number's not a whole lot different percentage wise, but there is an additional win in the quad 1A.
Right.
I think that carries a lot of weight. Obviously, losses matter. Bad losses matter. All of those things matter, but getting wins in there matters as well.
Right. Agreed. So that's how. And now, last year they had 23 wins. They were 12-8 in the conference. They easily had a winning record in the conference. That said, they were They ended up 3-8 on the road last year after the regular season, and they are now on the road 5-6. Right, and so like.
Oh, man, that reminds me. Nebraska has, no, because there's only the one road game left. Someone put on the Discord, and I'm very sorry, I'm forgetting who put it on there, but ask the question, when was the last time Nebraska finished above 500 on the road? And I think, it was above 500 on the road and in conference. And it was like 1991 or something.
Well, that would have been the year they were the 3 seed overall. So that would stand to reason. Yeah. A 3 seed for the tournament. I should
for the tournament. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it doesn't happen often, but yeah, if they could somehow get that Ohio State win, they would end up at 500 in road games for the year this year, which would be, man, that Penn State game would have been nice to have on there. They could have locked that up had they gotten that win. Now,
here's what it was. King Bob asked, when's the last time Nebraska had a winning record on the road plus neutral in the regular season?
Okay.
And so Nebraska can, if the Huskers beat Ohio State, then they would have a winning record of road plus neutral.
Okay. Interesting.
For the first time.
That would be
the early 90s.
That would be huge. Now, the NET, Nebraska was going into the tournament last year. Nebraska was 33. They're 51 this year. 52. So almost 20 spots different there, which feels concerning. If you go though to like Ken Palm, for instance, and I know these are all just tools, they're not necessarily going to be the whole thing, but it is interesting to look at them. If you go to Ken Palm, Nebraska's 43, and they were at, I believe, 30 at Ken Palm at the end of the year last year. So they're lower in those, right? But it depends what the committee's going to go with, right? You can make a case for this resume being better and worse than last year in some ways.
Yeah, it depends on what you look at, and that's the same complaint. You can make a case for what is this team? Yes. is this team Illinois, Oregon, or is this team Northwestern first half of Penn State? And
that's why I will not feel comfortable with 19 and 12. Well, will not feel, especially if the wins are Iowa and Minnesota.
Yeah, that does make it tough because you have opportunities in these last 4 to have another one of those that shows up as kind of a signature win.
Yeah.
Like when they show up on bracketology and they're doing the whole selection show and they're like signature wins, you have that opportunity Monday with Michigan. You have that opportunity on the road in Columbus.
Yeah. And to kind of bury Ohio State too for the NCAA tournament in some ways. There's almost a double. I don't know where Ohio State is in those tournament projections that you looked at.
Yeah, with Lenardi and ESPN, Ohio State is sitting at a 10 right now. So in the same ballpark as Nebraska. JBR has Ohio State as the last of the 4 buys. So they're just barely missing Dayton, only a couple spots away from where Nebraska is. And then T3 has Ohio State sitting in the same area as Nebraska, but needs 3 wins compared to Nebraska's 2. And that was as of a couple days ago.
Okay. The other thing is if you lose that Minnesota game, that's currently a quad 3 game. You've already got a quad 3 loss with Rutgers. That can move potentially. But when you look at Nebraska, sometimes we've done this thing where we look at the NET and we kind of compare quad 1, and Nebraska looks better than almost anyone within, 15 spots. That would look worse than anyone within 15 spots. If Nebraska would be 2-2 in quad 3, that's rough.
That's the other side of it, where there's the opportunities where you're looking at what can you do against Michigan or Ohio State. The other side of it is you can blow things up with a loss to a team that's playing as well as they have all year.
That would set Nebraska apart in the bubble for having a bad quad 3 record because you're looking around the bubble, like Santa Clara is in that area. I don't know that they're 5-3. Villanova is 4-2. They've got 2 losses, but 4-2. Memphis is 6-2. You got to go to like New Mexico, who's 1-2 in quad 3 to have anything that's comparable. Like there's nobody with that that's really on the bubble. That will be they've got to have that Minnesota game if they're going to try and do this with 19 wins.
So, and for anyone who's watching these next couple weeks, currently teams in Nebraska's area, according to these bracketology, and I'm just going to run these off from ESPN in the same area as Nebraska: Texas, West Virginia, San Diego State, Vanderbilt, Arkansas, VCU, Wake Forest. For JBR, it's San Diego State, BYU, Wake Forest, Ohio State, Texas, Vandy, VCU, Oklahoma. Oh, look, friends from the Big East. UConn is, and that should be an area. Wake Forest, VCU, BYU, West Virginia, Ohio State, Utah State, San Diego State. There's you're hearing a lot of those same names, and those are the, dare I say it, the who you rooting for.
Yeah,
go pick whoever they're playing.
Yep,
that's part of it. Is Nebraska needs to win. The other part of it is the bubble needs to stay bad.
Yeah, and the teams ahead of Nebraska, just ahead of Nebraska in the NET. To add on that, a lot of the same ones you said, but got Xavier, Pittsburgh, San Diego State, Memphis. They're going to get in at 21-5, but like Cincinnati, North Carolina ahead of them, Vanderbilt, West Virginia, New Mexico, Arkansas. Teams you talked about, get up to Georgia, and then you're at Creighton and UConn after a little while further. So Texas is up there at 35. I know you mentioned them too, but yeah, it's good to get these teams in our head right now as the other ones that will be helpful if Nebraska drops it. So I don't know, man.
All of those three between Lenardi, JVR, and T3, all of those have Xavier out. And you mentioned them as being ahead of Nebraska right now in that particular rating. Yeah.
Yep. And the teams around Nebraska and Bart Torvik, for like Memphis is below Nebraska and Bart Torvik, Villanova below them, and then right above them, San Diego State, Santa Clara, Kansas State at 13-13. Okay, he's got USC at 49 now. Jeez. Okay, well that is not going to help us very much. I mean, those teams aren't getting in the tournament without winning the whole thing. But
exactly,
I don't know, man. I have not been convinced. 19 is not going to make me feel comfortable. I suppose if you did 19 and then you got one win in the tournament, and let's go to the tournament scenarios, the Big Ten tournament scenarios.
Yeah, that's another place that you have to go because it'll be big for seeding when Nebraska and Ohio State play, because right now they are tied, but Ohio State having that tiebreaker, both teams 7-9 in the league.
So give me the most likely 19-10 scenario. So what, they win two more games? Would it just be Iowa and Michigan?
Iowa and Minnesota.
In Minnesota, I mean. Yeah, Iowa and Minnesota. And that might be what it's defaulted to. Yes. Just making sure here. Yep. Okay, that's what this is defaulted to. And so if this takes the team on Bart Torvik that's higher in every other game, Nebraska would be the 10 seed, would be 9-11, would be playing on the first day, and they would be playing a Minnesota team that they just beat in that scenario, with Illinois coming up next and then Maryland coming up after that.
It was pointed out, I know we don't normally mention these, but Josh brought it up. Nebraska did beat Ohio State. I don't know why I was thinking Ohio State beat Nebraska.
Yeah. Yep.
So Nebraska has the tiebreaker there.
Yes. And in this scenario, Ohio State is the 9, but Nebraska would be the 10. And yeah, so that could be significant. The standings in that situation would be Nebraska at 9-11, Ohio State at 10-10. Yeah, that Ohio State Nebraska game may be for not playing on the first day,
which is big. Like that's big, because you talk about what win would look better, the win at Ohio State or the win on the very first day where you're playing at the bottom of the Big Ten tournament.
Yeah.
Obviously one of those looks better if you say you just split, you lose to Ohio State and then you win on the first day, or you beat Ohio State and you lose on the first day that you'd be playing, but you had a bye in the Big Ten tournament. Right. One of those looks a lot better.
Yeah, the alternate, if you had Ohio State's bid, in that case, you would be facing Oregon on the second day, with the winner facing Wisconsin, and then going to the semis after that. But if you're at 19 and you beat Oregon in that game, I think then you feel good, right?
Yeah.
So there you go. That's what that looks like. I don't know if there's any other scenario that's worth running. I wonder if this is a weird scenario, likely wouldn't happen, but let's say Nebraska beats Ohio State, loses to Michigan, beats Minnesota, but loses in the last day to Iowa. So they're still weirdly at 19. Does that give them? Yeah, that gives them that Ohio State game really is likely for that 9 seed versus the 10 seed, Kaleb. For that tiebreaker that Josh was mentioning. That is very likely the difference between playing on day 1 versus a Minnesota, or versus, I suppose it could maybe be Northwestern in that scenario. I mean, generally teams you probably don't want to see on that first day because they're going to have nothing to lose, or get Rutgers up in that spot. Right. Yeah, you don't love that scenario going against one of those teams and having to win if you've only got 19 wins, or even worse, 18. Let's run that bad scenario. Let's say the only win you get is, what do you want it to be, Minnesota or Iowa?
I mean, the one most likely has got to be Minnesota. Okay. Still.
So I'm going to give Ohio State. So Nebraska, this is the scenario where Nebraska has to go on a run in the Big Ten tournament. This is where they have 18 wins. They go 8-12. They would face Iowa in the first game after possibly just losing to them, then Michigan, then Purdue. And I don't even know. I suppose if you still get to 20 in that scenario, you got a shot, right? If you win, you beat Iowa, you got to pull off one major upset at least to even be in contention, I would think. It still feels like if you get to a combination of 20, this may be wrong, but it's in my head, a combination of 20 is kind of the sweet spot.
I don't know in that last scenario, though. I could see Nebraska being part of the first 4 out, getting to 20 in that last scenario where they go 1-3 over the last bit of this regular season.
Yeah.
The reason being is that we know the tournament committee does not weigh the wins in the conference tournament as heavily as regular season, as before the conference tournament. So even though you would go and grab 2 wins there, I don't feel as confident in, do those 2 wins equate to half a win each in the regular season? In which case that would be,
you never know,
team number.
Like, and are they even watching? Do they already have Nebraska slotted, kind of, right? And just waiting for them to lose.
When you get to the conference tournament week, you're pretty much going to have stuff slotted, and you're moving seed lines at that point, and then going, okay, here's a bid that was stolen. Is this other team now in as an at-large, or do these other teams have to move around? That's ultimately what is happening over the course of that week. You can go play yourself in if you make it to the championship game for sure, but you're running off not just the 2 games at that point. Man,
I didn't come in thinking this, but that at Ohio State game is weirdly maybe one of the most important ones of the 4 here because of the tiebreaker that's involved. And listen to this: Ohio State coming off those 3 loser of 3 out of 4, loser of 4 out of 6, including getting destroyed, if you guys missed it, by Northwestern last night. What in the world? By 20 at home. They now go with their West Coast trip. Just now, they go to UCLA and USC on Sunday and Wednesday.
Well, and that was big for Northwestern because they're playing to try to make the Big Ten tournament. They're sitting as the first one out as the 16th team right now. And then Iowa is at 15, half a game ahead of them. There are technically, you could, if everything got super duper weird, Northwestern could play themselves into a bye. Right now they're sitting out. That's how bunched up everything is.
Yeah. And the thing about that Minnesota game is, very likely, I don't know their full schedule, but I would assume, Kaleb, that Minnesota game will be huge for Minnesota for getting into the tournament. I think they've played themselves into a spot where they now have a chance to do that, and they were not there until they pulled off those wins on the West Coast. I still can't believe that. They went out there and beat USC and UCLA on the road. They've got Penn State at home and Northwestern at home next. They could be coming into Lincoln, holy crap, on a 4-game winning streak. According to Bart Torvik, they likely will win both of those games.
Well, and those are 2 of the 3 teams at the bottom of the league. I know
those
what
are
Penn
huge
State
games
just
for them.
did, and I know what Northwestern just did, but that's still where the standings are for this league. So for Minnesota, you win those 2, and you've probably solidified yourself in the tournament.
Your eyes are getting big if you're Minnesota, because you got Penn State, Northwestern at home coming up Saturday, Tuesday. Then you go to Lincoln. Then you've got Wisconsin at home, and you're like, okay, here we go. We can really make some noise if we pull off the upset against our rival. And then you go to Rutgers to finish the season. And so they are going to be a potentially very motivated team coming into Lincoln on that night. And Iowa will be motivated because they hate Nebraska and they're going to want to stay in the tournament. The feeling is mutual, obviously. Michigan is going to be, I assume motivated. Yeah. And then Ohio State. I mean, there's not going to be, you're not catching any team when they're going to be in a sort of a sleepy mental mode, even if a team like Ohio State is down right now.
And maybe you can get that with Michigan on Monday.
That might be the best shot.
And here's the reason. Michigan has won 6 in a row, but what is happening tonight? They are hosting number 14 Michigan State. That game is tonight. The two top teams in the Big Ten Conference. So for Michigan, which, by the way, has a half-game lead on Michigan State, could turn it into a 7-game winning streak and have solidified themselves going into this last stretch as the Big Ten regular season title contender.
Holy crap.
Or things can go extremely wrong for them, and then they have to go on the road to Lincoln. Like there's a lot for Nebraska in that Michigan clearly has its eyes on what's happening tonight.
You want Michigan to win that game tonight. That's you want Michigan to beat Michigan State tonight, I think. And send them in on a 7-game winning streak. Make that win. Get them. The new polls will be out that day. Michigan will be up. I don't know where they're at now, like 13 or something.
Yeah.
They probably would get into the top 10 if they win that. Listen to how they end after Nebraska, though. So they go to Nebraska. Then Michigan has Rutgers, Illinois, and Maryland all at home. 3 straight home games. Where's that been for Nebraska? And then they play Michigan State again. This is the first of 2 meetings with Michigan State. What in the world? What in the world?
That is a bonkers stretch.
I mean, talk about stuff to like look forward to for Michigan. You're right. They're the only of the 3 teams that it feels like you are going to catch in a place where they're snoozing, and unless Ohio State is just the wheels have fallen off and the hot seat is fired up. That's the only other scenario.
And it feels like, because the other 3 teams, Ohio State, Minnesota, and Iowa, are all kind of playing for the right now, are playing for the where can you get into the Big Ten tournament? Can I get myself off the bubble if I am in that contention for the NCAA tournament? Can I put together a stretch here at the end of the season? Michigan, of course, is playing for the Big Ten regular season championship, and to have the top seed and the double bye and all of those things that come with it in the Big Ten tournament. But they're playing Michigan State twice over the next couple of weeks. And for Nebraska to get them just 2 days later or 3 days later after that game tonight, if there ever was out of these last few to go, someone might be napping, it would be the Michigan game. And that's not to say that they will, but I believe we're both saying the highest probability out of any of these teams remaining is Michigan.
Yes. Oh, and the only other thing about Ohio State, Kaleb, is the wheels could fall off with them would be the other scenario. Like I said, they go to their Western trip. They just lost 2 in a row. They're standing at 17-14 right now. If they would lose to both UCLA and USC, they're done with an at-large bid, I think. If they go 0-2, they would be 7. Dude, they would be 17-16. I mean, come on. Oh, that's a projected record. I apologize. I got that wrong. They would be 15-14. Like, come on, man. They're not, it's not happening. If you're 15-14, it's not, they're already in some real problems. Now they're 7-9 in the conference right now.
Well,
they're in Nebraska's spot where they probably need to get 3 of the last 4. And if they lose 2 coming into Nebraska, outside of a run to the championship, I think they're done if they lose both of those.
Well, and that's what it is, because when you were looking at those locks numbers for Nebraska at 2, Ohio State sitting at 3, and those numbers were set before Nebraska lost to Penn State, and Ohio State got the doors blown off of them by Northwestern. So Nebraska's still looking for 2. Ohio State's chase for 3 is getting much more difficult. And to have that stretch, I know Nebraska, it was tough with where the schedule worked its way out going through January. And ultimately you saw it play out with Nebraska having those 6 losses in a row. But for Ohio State, you can't be happy with the schedule makers where you have to make that West Coast trip the second to last week of the regular season as you are sitting on the bubble. Like, that's tough.
Yeah, for sure. And I don't know. I mean, I doubt after 1 year they'd put Diebler on the hot seat, but they will be very unhappy with how this thing ended, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they just moved on from Holtman last year, and Diebler did a great job picking them up, and now the opposite is happening at the end of the season. So, man, it's going to be a while. It is going to be a wild. And if Nebraska could just get it done Monday, Kaleb, the amount of just like now, it feels like you're outside of catastrophe. Certainly, could they go 1-3? Sure, but outside of catastrophe, you have put yourself in a spot to just be you and get at least one more win, like hopefully 2 wins at home. And then, and then go to Indy and see what happens and hopefully improve your seed and get out of that 8-9, stay out of that dang 8-9 game. Listen, beggars can't be choosers now, but if they would get to the point where they would beat Michigan and beat Minnesota, that would start to be my thought. Like, okay, you win enough games to either get to that 7 somehow or stay at the 10, because I hate that 8-9 game.
Well, and there's looking at that Ohio State game, by the way, there is a sweet spot between being rested and being rusty, and they will play USC on the Wednesday and not play again until hosting Nebraska the next Tuesday.
Mm-hmm. Yep, almost a week off.
Like that is a long stretch, and I know there's travel from the West Coast back to the Eastern time zone on that, but still, Nebraska is looking at right now in the middle of having 4 days off before getting to Michigan on Monday. Then they'll have another 4 off before Minnesota. But
they got a week off before Iowa, I think.
Yeah. This is at the end of the season here. It's almost. You want to get rested and you want to get healthy, but who's going to show up not rusty for some of these games?
Yep. Nebraska's games Monday, Michigan, Saturday, Minnesota. Those are the home games. Then Tuesday night at Ohio State, and then finishing it Sunday at Iowa on senior day. Also, senior day for Juwan Gary and Bryce Williams. And there's a part of you where it's like, man, there's no way they lose on senior day. But, man, Nebraska's ruined some senior days.
Yeah.
There's no way they should have.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at you, Davison. Man, that was funny. That will never not be funny. It will always be funny, and it will always be great.
Yes, it will.
It wasn't an Iowa Cup a while back, too, as well?
Yeah, in the last couple of years.
Whose senior day was that? Somebody, one of the McCaffrey guys, I'm sure, or someone. I don't know. It was great. It was great. Nebraska's got a weird tendency to do that at the end of the season, and so I hate to assume that just because it's senior day for two guys who have basically driven this entire renaissance, mini renaissance, I should say, for anybody else.
Yeah, for this 3-year stretch.
Like, this is as meaningful. I mean, Case, obviously you had Casey's senior day. That was a huge deal last year. But these two, man, they've been the if they get to 2 tournaments in a row, it's going to be because those are the guys who drove the bus on that thing.
Yeah, and we didn't even mention when you talk about those guys, Bryce Williams is playing himself into first team all conference conversations. He's put himself into Big Ten Player of the Year conversation. That's not to say that he'll necessarily get that, but being in the conversation is something that Nebraska hasn't had for a hot minute.
Prediction: Bryce Williams goes for 40 against Iowa.
Please.
They don't play defense. Bryce how has he not done that in a game? There's going to be a game. I think it's going to be senior day. Bryce going for 40. He's taking a shot at
PBA. I like it.
He's taking a shot at March and Teddy.
And Teddy. Oh, Theodore.
Oh, Theodore buckets. That's my very oddly specific prediction for the Iowa game. It feels like he's going to go off in one of those games and make that push for the first team too.
Yeah.
And who knows, top few in play. It almost feels like, man, if they're talking about him for the potential first team and even on the fringes of player of the year, it's just like, man, if he had been a little more aggressive.
Yes.
A little more aggressive, like
here or there.
What would we be talking about right now? And what if he saved it? What if he saved it, Kaleb? He saved it for
this final stretch here.
Saved it for this lot. He's like, my whole career, I'm going to wait for the last 4 regular season games, starting with the Michigan game, really a standalone game on Monday where there's not many games, and make my statement to the world.
Yes.
And then throughout the postseason, and I'm going, forget 19, 21, 24. We're talking 33, 37, 32, 41.
Go get it. Go get it. By the way, not men's basketball, women's basketball has their senior day on Sunday as well. Alexis Markowski had 35 points in an overtime win the other day. That was entertaining as hell. But Husker men back at home Monday. This will be the only one that we have before our next brunch show. So the after Nebrasketball will be about 9:30 Monday evening.
And I'm going to the game.
All right.
And I believe that's the stripe out. Alex said it was the Minnesota game, but I think it's the Michigan game. At least that was the email I was sent by my boss.
Everything that I had seen said Minnesota.
Minnesota. Okay, my bad. Then I just misunderstood an email that I was sent. You guys are right. I'm wrong. So that's a Minnesota game, the stripe out game. Michigan, probably, bring your own. Michigan being there will bring your own energy. The stripes will add energy against Minnesota, I suppose. And then, the good news is you don't, between senior day and Iowa, it feels like you don't have to worry about Nebraska sleepwalking in that one.
Yeah, exactly.
Great time breaking all this down. Hope you guys followed us. We were kind of all over the place, but this is the fun part of this year. Real quick, before we wrap, I am going to give you your cheering guide for tonight. Does Bart Torvik's cheering guide confuse you? Have you looked at the rooting guide for Bart? Sometimes
it does, yeah.
Like, I'm going to pull this up, and it's going to be some weirdly random game, and you're going to have no idea why exactly Nebraska. Yeah, it's Bowling Green at Toledo is the biggest cheering. Why is that? I don't. Does that have to do with Toledo being on the bubble? The second one is Cornell over Yale. Okay, this is Thursday night, so there's not a lot of games.
Hey, that goes without saying.
I don't know what's going on with that. But a few down, they do have Michigan over Michigan State to confirm what I said earlier. Yeah. And shout out for Husker for MU. Marquette beating Villanova actually could help tonight. Actually, that definitely, I can see how that would help. So little viewing guide tonight. Cheer for the Wolverines and then cheer for the Marquette Golden Eagles.
And obviously it'll be free with after Nebrasketball, but you guys with the I-80 Club have had a very busy week, and you guys have a new tier that you just announced.
Volleyball State tier is now live, and so if you know if you yourself are a volleyball fan or know volleyball fans in your family that might not be aware of us, like I do, let them know about Volleyball State being a part of the I-80 Club. At very least, make sure like the YouTube page, subscribe to the YouTube page, check out the new Patreon. We've added a new tier where Jeff Sheldon and Lincoln Arneal, those guys know more about Nebraska volleyball in the media space than anyone. And frankly, they've got a national presence on the scene, as you'll see with the interviews that they are pulling. They are now starting to put up premium content for their tier. It can get you into the Discord as well, so you can be a part of the shows. It's going to get you a newsletter. Just go to patreon.com/I-80 Club and look what that offer is out there for $5 a month for the volleyball fan in your life. You can even gift it to them if you would like to.
Ooh, nice.
Do that. I think they will appreciate it. Those guys are going to do some great stuff. They're going to put up their first premium show. I don't know if it's out already or not or coming, but they did an all-time draft of Nebraska.
Yeah, I think that's out right now.
You guys sent a billion texts about it, and I was doing Munch Madness, so I might have not completely followed, but it'll be there for you. So check it out, patreon.com/I-80 Club, and volleyball fan, or if you can join the $8 tier and you get all of it if you want to do that. Volleyball State's included if you join the $8 tier. That gets you all of Josh and my shows, all of the stuff Kaleb and I are already doing. Gets you in the Discord chat for the live studio audience for Kaleb and my shows, and all of that. So join that. Anything else on Husker Max, Kaleb, before I say goodbye?
Nope. Obviously, there was massive news this morning about the Nebraska football and Tennessee canceling future stuff there. Nebraska baseball on the road at Lafayette. Softball had a disappointing one to a loss to UCLA yesterday, but they've also got Duke coming up later today, a ranked team number 11 in the country. All of that, whole lot more, HuskerMax.com.
All right, that's it for Nebrasketball Brunch. We will see you back here for more Nebrasketball talk late Monday night, hopefully celebrating a massive win. Until then, have a great one, GBR, and join us on the I-80 Club and Husker Max going forward.